got participants coming in at the moment. So we'll just wait for a few minutes. I think Brad is still not yet back from his coffee. So Rara is here. Pamela is still not yet in. Okay. All right. Oh, hang on. So, swept. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, Brad is here. Just waiting for, yes, Brad is here. We're just waiting for Sorara to turn her video on, and also Pamela, if they could just turn their video on for the sake of the photo session. Sorara. Okay, great.
Sorry.
So Aftar can take the video.
Yes, sure.
Sorry, the photo.
Okay, stand by. 1, 2, 3. Okay, one more. 1, 2, 3.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks.
Is that a picture or a screenshot?
It's a screenshot.
The new normal.
New normal. Yeah. Okay. So we'll begin shortly. So we'll start off with the video, and then we'll begin the proper program. Sorry, Aftar.
Yep.
You can start the,
Video. Yep.
yeah.
Very good.
So, well, I hope you enjoyed that short video from of our webinar for today. Our major sponsor for this event is Marine Instruments, and I take this time to acknowledge and appreciate Marine Instruments for sponsoring this very important webinar. Thank you very much for your kind contribution and investing in our event. A very good morning, a very good afternoon to all the participants that have just joined in from whatever time zones you are in. Welcome to this InfoFish webinar on tuna fisheries in the Pacific amidst COVID-19. My name is Api Dokanasinga, and I'm the Trade Promotion Officer for InfoFish. I'm also joined here by the Director of InfoFish, Ms. Sherlyn Anthony Sami. And together we warmly welcome each and every one of you today. Also a special welcome to our panelists, our keynote speaker, and of course, our moderator for today's webinar. On behalf of the Director of InfoFish, we would like to thank you for accepting our invitation to speak at this very important webinar. InfoFish is an intergovernmental organization that is based in Malaysia that provides marketing information and technical advisory services to the fishery industry of the Asia Pacific region. So for the past few months, since the pandemic started, we have been organizing series of webinars relating to tuna fishery in the global context, particularly on trade and markets, certification and technology. And just recently, we concluded with the Tuna 2021 virtual mini conference, which is a prelude to the main Tuna conference scheduled in May next year. So InfoFish was encouraged to organize this webinar focusing on tuna fisheries in the Pacific, considering that the vast majority of tuna consumed around the world is caught in the Western and Central Pacific region. And for this reason, the impact of the impact of the pandemic in this region needs to be addressed. So today we have a fantastic lineup of speakers from the Pacific, and we encourage participants to submit questions to the speakers. So please use the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen and not on the chat box. So please make sure to include the name of the speakers that you would like to address your questions to. We will answer some of these questions live, and we will also get the speakers to answer the questions by typing them out. Thirdly, we have poll questions. We'll prepare these poll questions up towards the end of this event. Also, we would like you to provide your feedback on today's webinar on the chat box. So this will help us to improve in organizing our future events. For those who would like to get copies of the presentation, we will have the recording of this webinar on our YouTube channel. If you'd like to watch the recording, please subscribe to our channel to get the notification of the recording being uploaded. So to kickstart our event for today, let me just introduce our moderator. Our moderator is Mr. Francisco Blaha. He is someone familiar in the tuna industry in the Pacific, as well as at the international level. Francisco experience ranges all across the fisheries sector since the 1980s, starting as a backhand and later fisheries observer in the South Atlantic. He then moved on to the longliners and purseaners in the Western Central Pacific and back to trawlers and longliners in New Zealand. He has worked his way in the fisheries world to his present position as an advisor for over 12 international organizations in more than 55 countries worldwide. Currently, he is supporting the integration of PSM, MCS, and CDS in the Pacific for FFA. He's also working as an operational MCS advisor in the Marshall Islands and Kiribati under a New Zealand government contract. And he's also working with FAO on traceability, decent labor conditions on fisheries, and new technologies in fisheries. Being able to work in 3 languages, he's comfortable in fishing boats, processing factories, and boardrooms, mostly in that order. He also maintains an active blog on fisheries issues. So I warmly welcome Mr. Francisco, and I give this time over to him to take over the program. Thank you.
Kia kauto, everyone, wherever you find yourself. Warm welcomes to the Pacific. It's a great opportunity to be here. I want to start this small meeting by acknowledging everyone who's here from our Pacific friends here that you see on screen. Under the new normal, we used to enjoy each other's presence. Now we enjoy each other's images. We wouldn't start any meeting in the Pacific without acknowledging and thanking whoever you believe is your deity or your ancestors or your luck to be here, because we are quite lucky to be here. A lot of people is not lucky to be here for various reasons. So I want to acknowledge everyone here and everyone listening to us for supporting us and for giving us this opportunity to talk. I wish you, everyone who is not in the country, who is going through difficult situations now, the best health, and for them and the family. With these little things, I want to start and introduce the first speaker here, Mr. Pamela Maru, Secretary of Marine Fisheries and Resources in the Cook Islands. I've known Pam for a long time. She's been my boss in FFA, and I'll say the first time I met her I was looking for a paddle in the Cook Islands, and there she came, and boom. An hour later, there was 2 excellent paddles that I could buy. So that has always been a good impression I have from Pam. If you want something done, Pam gets it done. Sometimes she's straight, direct, and some of the things she has to say you may not like it, but you know they're good for you. It's sort of like a medicine. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Pam, who is one of the people who knows the best how fisheries works in the Pacific at all levels, and now is one of the many women at the head of fisheries organizations we have in the Pacific. FFA is one now, PNA is another one with Elsa Sangata, and she's one of the few that we have at the national level. So welcome to us to present everyone, and my daughter says hello. She's downstairs. Thank you, Pam. Unplug yourself and your microphone and light us. Thank you.
Kia ora everyone, hello, and thanks Francisco for that very generous introduction. I just wanted to start off with saying to everyone who's joining us today, and to all my Pacific Wantoks and whānau, to our friends who've joined from wherever you are around the world, greetings, or as we say in the Cook Islands, kia orana. When Francisco first invited me to participate in this webinar, he said, no formalities. What I really want, if I could, is to have us all sitting on a waka or an outrigger canoe, sharing some cover, which my mate Sefa knows well, so does Dr. T, and just having a chat. No international organizations, no one promoting a product or regime, just folks at the front line who know what happens day in, day out. Frontline folks, no frills, but Pacific people who genuinely care about what they do, the fishery we work in, and the people they do it for. He sold me with that. So thanks for having me today. Francisco certainly knows me well, because if I had it my way, my business suit would be shorts, a t-shirt and jandals. Done. Seriously though, for me it's a privilege to be part of this conversation. And the reason being is because when you get involved in international fisheries, you hear a lot about what is going on in many other parts of the world. You hear a lot about what developed countries or international organizations are promoting or have determined is the best way to do things. You hear about various projects to improve fisheries management and monitoring, compliance and surveillance, or MCS. But you don't always hear too much about the Pacific. But you are hearing about a bit more in recent years about it. And so whilst we have the largest tuna fishery in the world, that doesn't necessarily translate to visibility or awareness, and yet we have a great story to share, the Pacific tuna story. Whilst the topic of today's webinar is the tuna fishery in the Pacific amidst COVID-19, there is a lot to understand when talking about tuna in the Pacific. So I want to thank the team at InfoFish for providing us the opportunity, this platform to share what we have going on here in the Pacific region. We are fortunate to have an amazing lineup of people who work at the heart of the Pacific tuna fishery, a range of people who will be sharing their experiences, and there's quite a mix of talent in the pool. From old hands like Dr. Transform Makuro, or Dr. T as we call him, and Sefa Fukufuka, who for 20 years that I've been involved in the game has spent his time living and breathing fisheries observer work, knowing what life is really like out there on the Pacific Ocean. Importantly, we also have industry representatives, Brett from Fiji, Cynthia from the Solomon Islands, folks who can help ground truth what we are seeing and hearing, starting from the harvesting sector and on through the supply chain. Excitingly, we also have some young guns with us too, with the likes of Bo and Saurara, who clamber up and down boats every day, inspect processing plants and fishing products, and who represent the future of our Pacific fisheries, dedicated and enthusiastic to learn and grow in their roles. So for me, this is an amazing lineup of folks. Thanks to Francisco for bringing us together. There are a couple of areas that I wanted to touch on today, and this is more about the impacts of COVID, the broader context of the tuna fishery in the Pacific, because you're going to hear a bit more about the specifics from our frontliners. Firstly, a little bit of a reality check. What we're talking about here is the Western and Central Pacific tuna fishery, which makes up about 81% of the total tuna caught in the Pacific Ocean, 3.7 million tonnes that's caught in the Pacific, and 81% of that from the Western Central Pacific region. 55% of global tuna catches is what comes out of the Western and Central Pacific Ocean. That's almost 3 million tonnes. That's valued at $5.8 billion US last year alone. And what does that mean for the Pacific Islands? Well, it means a heck of a lot. It means life. There are 2 regional fisheries management organizations in the Pacific Ocean that are responsible for the management of tuna stocks. But again, our focus is on the Western and Central Pacific, the realm of the Western and Central Pacific Fisheries Commission, an area that is home to the small island developing states from countries such as Palau in the west, right across to French Polynesia in the east. It's also home to a number of regional organizations that have provided support, technical advice and services to Pacific Island nations, the Foreign Fisheries Agency being one, and also the Office of the Parties to the Nauru Agreement, or the PNA office. These two organizations, along with the Pacific community, provide a vital support network to the countries in providing not only fisheries management, policy advice, economics, MCS, but also science and research. And so that's just a very quick snapshot of what the broader framework is here in the Pacific. When we talk about the Western and Central Pacific Ocean, we're talking about a multi-jurisdictional, multi-species, multi-gear regional fishery, with the bulk of that being managed by Pacific Islands. The COVID-19 pandemic has required a rapid response from our governments to ensure the health and safety of our people, but also to minimize the risk of transmission to our islands. We absolutely live on tropical paradises, as seen in the background photo that I have there. I'd rather show you that instead of the fluoro or high-vis vests that are actually behind me. But in those tropical paradises, we do have limitations and vulnerabilities that are inherent when living and working on small island developing states. Limited access to health and medical services, whether we have the ability to control outbreaks, are serious risks to not only the health and welfare of our people, but also our economies. We saw our friends in the Marshall Islands were one of the first islands to close their borders in January this year, with other Pacific nations following suit soon after. Samoa, who experienced a measles outbreak in 2019 that affected a third of their population, also took stringent measures to protect themselves from COVID-19, as did we in the Cook Islands in March this year. Necessary closing of borders that includes air and seaports affected more than the tuna fishery. It affected key industries that support national economies across the Pacific, such as tourism, sectors that have a broad and long reach into our societies. For example, from the mama selling her fruits at the market, she's no longer got the number of customers she used to have, tour operators with no one to show around and hotels with no guests. What this pandemic has done is shone a light on the tuna fishery, however. It has highlighted the importance for us to diversify and provide more resilience in our economies, and to ensure the sustainability of our tuna stocks so that we can continue to provide for food security and the livelihoods of our people. When I say our people, this ranges from the subsistence fisher on the island of Puka Puka, for example, who provides for his family, to the domestic longliner who provides employment and supplies to the local market with fresh fish, but also to the foreign fishing vessels that work in our waters that provide revenues for our schools, infrastructure, and national healthcare systems. COVID-19 has impacted several aspects of the tuna fishery, from the harvesting and access to port services, the processing sector affecting logistics and supply chains, and the monitoring and management of this fishery. The Pacific tuna fishery can be likened to a woven pandemic basket, or what we call a kete. It's a tightly interconnected lattice of strips that must be connected to one another in order to hold its shape and contents. And what COVID-19 has tried to do is pick at some of those strips. From a fisheries management perspective, we've had to proactively respond to specific issues, such as international obligations. We are bound by conventions and treaties that flow into our national laws in which we must abide by or meet. For example, the need to address the inability to safely deploy and keep fisheries observers at sea and safe from transmission, or potentially them becoming vectors and introducing COVID-19 to their home islands. What I've seen is a use of the information and data that is shared between industry and governments, and data shared between Pacific nations, such as the members of the PNA and the FFA, in a way to combat COVID-19 transmission quite cleverly. For example, using baseline information from vessel monitoring systems and AIS, from vessel entry-exit reports and the like, for contact tracing and risk assessments to determine whether a vessel can or can't enter port, whether someone coming in or off a fishing vessel should or shouldn't enter your country. Using a national and regional security health lens instead of the usual MCS focus. What that's demonstrated is that the Pacific has done a pretty good job at developing its foundation of management arrangements, data collection, monitoring, and information sharing to monitor and assess not only our fisheries, but also to maintain our national security, and working with national and regional agencies and partners to keep the Pacific relatively safe from the frightening trends in COVID cases and deaths that we are seeing elsewhere in the world. Importantly, what also resonates is how vital our culture in the Pacific is. Our responses by our governments also reflects the way that we live, our community spirit, and living in our extended families. And by extended, I mean that your father's, mother's, and niece's brother is still called your uncle. Here in the Pacific, we work for the collective, not the individual, to tackle threats to our way of life, such as this pandemic. This pandemic has provided us an opportunity to check that what we have and where we are going is on the right track. It is also timely to remember that there is no such thing as a perfect system. And even though we have the geographical, natural, and economic challenges that we face in each one of our islands, what I can say is that for our tuna fishery, we have a pretty good system in place, a solid foundation that supports us even in a pandemic, and for us to continue to build on. Fundamentally, what we've tried to do is to keep business continuity, and that's been done in a lot of the work that we've done, including in the negotiations for international obligations that we may or may not be able to meet, that we've had to derogate from temporarily, to carefully and cautiously provide services for our fishing fleets using initiatives such as the development of health and safety protocols for use in the fishing sector. This also extends to fisheries management. Limitations of a virtual world on international fisheries negotiations and the risks of ensuring that we can effectively participate and not be marginalized as a small island developing state is an issue that we've had to grapple with this year. I, like many others, am already zoomed out and find working in different time zones a real challenge. But I know other colleagues who, in some of the other Pacific Island nations, challenged with even connecting to the internet. And so they are kept out of really participating in the fisheries management discussions and negotiations that must continue even through a pandemic. As well as the infrastructure limitations, having good secure internet connections that are not going to be too expensive for small administrations or businesses seems to be a crucial part of our business today, especially in this pandemic. But at the core of it, all of the work that we've been doing throughout this pandemic is really people-focused. It's not only about the vessel crews and observers, people who work in onshore processing and throughout the supply chain, but the livelihoods of people, including our observers, those who can't go out to sea any longer, but yet have to provide for their families. The possibility that we might lose or see more attrition from a skilled workforce where we already have challenges in trying to get qualified and skilled expertise into certain parts of the fishing industry. So what this raises is a question: what will our fishery look like post-COVID? There is going to be some interesting discussion that I'm looking forward to hearing from our industry representatives about the likelihood of whether their businesses can survive through this pandemic and what they're seeing in their sector. the impacts of specific fleets. We know that the longline sector is being particularly affected by the COVID-19 pandemic and access to markets, for example, versus what the purse seine fishery is experiencing. How will this impact the different countries and subregions? Will we see a change in the fleet dynamics or characteristics that we currently or pre-COVID had seen? You'll no doubt hear from our amazing lineup of frontliners. And again, I want to thank you all for joining us today. And thank you to the InfoFish team and Francisco for pulling this together. Thanks for listening. Kia manuia.
Thank you, Pam. That was very nice, very straightforward. Api tells me that he's going to put a small video here for people who actually are supporting this. But yeah, I want to pick up later on a couple of things he says that were fantastic. Thank you for making everyone feel welcome. Good.
Yeah.
There you go. I should have a career on TV after this, presenting things around. Anyway, I appreciated the analogy you did to the kete and how we are all interconnected, and this doesn't happen without people. And in Maori, which is one of the official languages of the country that has hosted me for over half my life, they say, "E haha te mea nui a te ao, e tangata, e tangata, e tangata." What is the most important thing in the world? It's his people, it's his people, it's his people. And that is particularly important in tuna fisheries in the Pacific. The next speaker here at the moment is somebody who has been, as Pam said, an old hand in the Pacific. If you don't know who Transform Makorao is, you don't know tuna fisheries, in my opinion, because he has pretty much held every possible job that you can have. But the one that I met him on was when he took over PNA, which was sort of an obscure little organization inside an organization to be the driving organization in the tuna world. And this has been quite an impressive trip. And if you ever want to know more about it, I recommend you read his book, which is called Fishing for Success, Lessons in Pacific Regionalism, which is available for free on the web. And he has been very kind to illustrate with many of my pictures. So definitely a person who has an incredible amount of knowledge on what happened here. But also is still, I've been to his house, to his native house, to his land, where he goes to his family, but long time. And we had these long conversations about the future of fisheries, about technology, about issues like the Inoro initiative, which is the totally integrated port that surely we're going to talk about this, while sitting in the garden kitchen, having a kava and a cup of tea out of the kettle on the fire. So I totally love this idea that you can look at the future and you can be working right at the future, at the border of what is the contemporary issues and fisheries, while still hold to your style of life and to your tradition. So with this little introduction, please Transform, come on board.
Thank you very much, Francisco, for your very generous and kind words of introduction, and also for the bit of publicity about my book. If listeners don't mind and viewers don't mind, I will keep my video off only because we have limited bandwidth here, and I'm using my mobile phone. So if you don't mind, but I want to thank the organizers for the invitation, and hopefully by the end of my talk, be able to explain to listeners about some of the things that's happening in the fishery. But I'm sure that later on there are actually people who know more than me who will be talking about the fishery. I just have a number of points that I put down as first of all, I think in terms of the fishery itself in 2020, there's been an overall there has been overall an on average high level of fishing effort in 2020, as evidenced by the uptake of days generally in the PNA region. Although we saw less days actually fished in 2019, according to the SPC report on effort levels to the WCPFC Technical and Compliance Committee. What we're seeing is on average catch per unit effort, particularly at this time of the year in places like Solomon Islands, PNG and FSM is generally higher. But as I said, it's coming against lower lower than average effort in 2019. And this is probably due to La Nina. And it's not really clear if effort for next year, for 2021, will mostly be the same as 2019 and 2020, or if it will shift back to the Eastern Pacific. But as we speak now and as we meet, many of the vessels, most of the fishing that's taking place right now is taking place in the West, in Papua New Guinea and Solomon Islands and in FSM. But that's due to La Nina. But interestingly, the Korean fleet is being concentrated its efforts still around the eastern part of the Pacific. More specifically to Solomon Islands, and I don't know whether this is really COVID related, but catches within the Solomon Islands EEZ have been down by approximately 20% this year compared to the average catches for the last 10 years within the Solomons. And it's probably, I don't think it can be attributable to COVID-19, but it's an interesting trend to see the level of the catch per unit effort levels in Papua New Guinea and Solomon Islands, and to ask whether over the last few years there's been a lot of fishing pressure around that area. I think the impact of COVID on the long line industry has been more telling. It's been and Brett is going to speak more on that, but we all know that it has been adversely affected, especially those fleets that rely on fresh exports. We saw that the rapid decrease and even the complete cessation of air freight capacity to international markets due to COVID has had huge, major economic ramifications for the fresh longline fleet operating in the Pacific and Australia. We're also seeing that the ultra low ULT sashimi prices in Japan have actually decreased market quite remarkably in the second and third quarter of this year. Although there's some recovery in the prices for ULT yellowfin and big eye tuna, which is evident over the sales in the last month. But the result of these shifts in the prices, we've seen some vessels opting to target albacore rather than yellowfin and big eye tuna during this period. So there's some changes in fishing patterns and what the vessel are targeting as a result of changes in prices in the market. We all know what the impact is on port restrictions, and these have been initially initially when COVID-19 broke out, it slowed down business to business and transaction. But in the industry have been able to work around these restrictions to ensure steady and unbroken supply chain, largely to Bangkok and Ecuador, which are really the two major destinations of catch from the West and Central Pacific. But even then, Francisco, the travel restrictions are quite pervasive. And most of the island countries have largely closed their borders, not to fishing vessels, but closed their borders to foreigners, to non-nationals. So, it's making it impossible or difficult to service some of the highly specialized technicians that are needed to fix or commission technically complex machinery and equipment. And so the result of that is that there's some capital projects that therefore have had to be delayed. So these delays have an impact on the operations of particularly the domestic processing operations. And I can say that it is having an impact on some of the capital projects here in Solomon Islands. We all know what the impact is on travel restrictions it's having on observers. They can't travel, and it's coming at the expense of there's been some criticism from NGOs to these disruptions, but obviously there are those in the panel who know more than myself on the impact of. But certainly, Francisco, these unloading approvals and protocols in some of the Pacific Island country port states have actually, from the industry perspective, have deterred some vessels to unload in port. So, there may have been corresponding increase in transshipment to carriers in the long line fleet, but that remains to be seen. But broadly, the reality is that things have slowed down, and it is certainly not up to par before the pandemic. And while the supply chain is still relatively unbroken, there are a lot of challenges still on changing crew and deployment issues, which are costing the fishing industry. And all these delays have a cost. And I think Pam touched a little bit on crewing, but maybe it might be worth mentioning more explicitly that these difficulties are causing, while most of the crew have willingly stayed on board in 2020 for an extended period, thinking that it will be over by the end of the year, I think the looming continuation of the pandemic into the next year, although a vaccine might be available, and with all these, changing travel restrictions, it is certainly having an effect on the industry. It's going up to Christmas now, and I know that at this point in time, the crews who would be wanting to go home, and they will be wanting to be replaced. So, that is certainly a negative, detrimental impact could potentially affect, efficiency and attrition rates in the field. And then, when people are not happy and they're tired, could have safety and occupational health issues. Francisco, I think it's also important to look at the average price trends in Bangkok, and on average, these have been steady in 2020, with the highest seen at the beginning of the FAD closure in July. So they've been teetering around between 1,300. It's 1,300 this month, but it's the average has been between 1,200 and a high of 1,500 at the beginning of the FAD closure. But it's interesting to note whether or not these prices are attributable to what are the factors that are driving the changes in the prices. And I think the prices have been steady because of a short supply since the pandemic, and also through the FAD closure, and mainly also because factories have contracted deals late last year and early this year at low canned tuna prices per case. So they've got these contracts in which they have to serve at lower prices. But I think generally overall, if you're looking at the impact, the fact of the matter is that canned tuna volumes have declined, and also the markets have lost the catering pack market from March to the present, which represents around 20 to 30% of the canned market in the EU and in the United States. So only retail packing continues to remain stable. It became stronger in Europe during the start of the pandemic, but it's kind of lost steam by June and July, and now it's normal. But still, catering pack is struggling. So overall, I think for there's a broad conclusion that can be made is that demand might be down. But having said that, Francisco, our stocks continue to remain healthy biologically. And we all know that with the most recent stock assessments, they are in the green. But Francisco, I think there are differential impacts between those who have domestic operations that are vertically integrated with the market and those who are actually seeing increased, I think there's increased activity that we see there, and those whose business models rely on transshipments. But broadly, the industry have had to adjust to the new normal. But it's having said that, it's interesting, however, that in Solomon Islands there's been a noticeable decrease in money circulating in the Honiara and the Solomon Islands economy generally. The fact that a lot of business travel and the expatriates that are associated with non-government organizations, that's filtered, those benefits filter down to the man on the street. So, what they're seeing here in Solomon Islands is reduced purchases of the most popular brand of tuna, which is the dark blue tuna flakes, which is the most economical canned tuna. So there's also been a reduction in the premium products. But that's being offset in some ways by an increase in purchases of white flakes. But what this tells you is that much of the premium tuna products may have been purchased by the expat workers and visitors and who left during the beginning of the pandemic. So there is you can say that the impact of the pandemic on the industry itself has a percolating effect down actually to the community, especially where people have left. But for salt tuna generally, I think they're lucky that they're part of an integrated supply chain, and so they've been able to survive on frozen loin sales and reduced can sales. So I think generally Noro is still thriving, and I'm happy to say that. But they're also looking to increase plus more on regional markets to grow the canned tuna sales. It's interesting to look at the level of where the investments are being made in terms of the responses to the impact of COVID. And so, of course, we all know that a lot of the investments are in health and in mitigating the risks. But in the process, it's actually resulted in slower responses to health officials being able to attend to sick Asian crews, and maybe in terms of government attention, giving less attention to building capacity to other places. So overall, generally, the uncertainty caused by COVID-19 has also made wholesalers and end buyers to hesitate on their purchases, resulting in canneries overall, broadly, and generally to decrease their daily processing. I like to think that maybe there's an increase in global demand for canned tuna, but I think the argument might be that there is probably it's hard to say. If you actually include sashimi tuna into the equation, you could probably say that the international demand is actually going down because, as we all know, sashimi is mainly restaurant fish plus catering packs. So that's going down. Just on other issues that are of importance in the fishery, we know that social accountability issues, and in 2020, the Human Rights at Sea report actually brought a lot of prominence on welfare and safety issues. As to the demand and what's happening with the vessel day scheme, I'm not as close as I used to be, but I think there can be some general sort of observations that I'd like to make, and that is that broadly, demand for days for 2021 might be slow. I don't know about the others, but I do know for some islands the uptake has not been as what it was in the past. And maybe because what has happened this year is that there might have been days that still remain unused or just being used because it was already bought. But I think overall, just speaking to the industry, they're saying that actual fishing days might be lower due to delays at port as well. So as we go into the pandemic and try and address mitigation issues, there are two sides to. There's the regulatory aspect and making sure that the conservation management measures still remain. You protect the integrity of those measures, but at the same time, there's also the profitability and the economics of the fishing vessels that we need to take into consideration. And just my discussions with the industry is that and this comes as no surprise that generally some of the boat owners are complaining that they're losing money due to low tuna prices and higher costs. And of course, they're saying that the cost of the VDS days have not actually come down. And so rather than it is, they're struggling. I mean, they're looking for a pathway in which you could probably maybe reduce the number of tie-up vessels or reduce the number of fishing days to save them, rather than pay higher fees. But that is an argument for another day. What might be some of the impacts that are non-COVID related, but could have an impact on the economics and patterns of fishing? A decision on WTO rules on fisheries subsidy is due at the end of this year, or at the latest in June 2021. So the outcome of that could have an impact on the fishing industry itself, could have an impact on access and license fees if they're included in these disciplines. And so that's something that our regulatory authorities need to be aware of. And just finally, just couple of points. I think on the one hand, you've got the need for increased regulation, conservation, and management, while at the same time ensuring that the services that are being provided both to the industry and also to governments remain sustainable. And I think from the industry perspective, there is some concerns that they have with potential increase in registration fees despite the pandemic. And of course, the intention to charge for use on fads in 2021, could possibly change the economics of the fishery as well. And so, those are looming things ahead of us. But on the bright side, I think there are huge opportunities that the pandemic, plus where we are now. You mentioned about the Noro traceability project that we've got here to try and pilot test the integration of the different databases so that we have a wholly integrated and digitized electronic catch documentation and traceability scheme for Noro. And that we're making quite good progress of that. So those are some bright lights, and it shows that at the end of the day, technology can also help to continue to ensure that that we are able to attract vessels, but also at the same time be able to prevent and detect illegal and unregulated fishing. We're able to have effective port state measures and be able to track the fishery from the fishing vessel to the plate. And so those are new initiatives that are on the horizon, or some things that this particular point in time in the fishery creates the opportunity for us to be innovative. And so that's basically my 2 cents piece, Francisco, on an overview of the fishery and the impacts of COVID. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. T. As people saw during the presentation, you are the CEO of Tuna Intel. And when we work on MCS, having an Intel analysis of the arriving vessels gives you a lot of information of what's happening. And when you listen to you, I always enjoy how can you put together so many strands of information into giving the intelligence that is needed when you work in this business, because it's not just about catching fish. It would be so easy if it was only about that. So thank you very much, and I'm sure there will be a lot of food for thought there. I started taking notes, and then after 2 pages, I kind of had enough. But it's definitely a lot of food for thought there. Thank you very, very much. The next session is one that I'm very, very happy about, because when we discussed this with initially with InfoFish, I was really keen to bring this up, and I'm so thankful for InfoFish to have said yes, because normally we have the experienced hands, the people in the desks, the people that go to the meetings, but the people who is going to be in the desk in a few years' time, the people who is confronting the reality every day, are the ones you normally don't see. And in this case, I'm very, very lucky to have known the 4 people in this Frontliners panel for a long time. I'm going to start by excusing my good friend Kikiva Tepaya, who unfortunately couldn't be here. It feels strange to be talking about fishing in the Pacific without somebody from PNG, but unfortunately couldn't make it for various reasons that don't come to the case. He did send me some of his views, which I may bring in if they are appropriate later on. But for the other 3 that are here, I'm going to start with Saurara. One thing that we talked with Transform many times is to say, if I'm good at my job, means that I don't have a job, because part of what we do as a consultants or as people is to work on capacity building. So if you keep having jobs after 10 years, the 20 years means that you haven't built some capacity. So, and a lot of the work I used to do at the market access issues, Saurara Gonalevu here has been the person who I have basically said, this is your world now. She has been, since I met her over 15 years ago, a bright spot. Her last work was still in Kiribati, where she's been helping them with all the issues around the European Union. And besides doing an excellent job, besides understanding the Pacific as only Pacific Island people can do, she managed to, while doing all that, being the mother of 2 kids and having graduating with honors on an MBA. I barely can do one thing at a time, so I just in awe, how can you do all those things at once? The other frontliner that I'm here is somebody whose family I've known for many, many years. I worked for the fishing company as a fisherman. Then I came back in terms of my work as regulators, and is one of the key persons, key families around the Inoro initiative that Transform was talking about, and it's Cynthia. Cynthia Wickham has done, she was doing science, she was doing tagging of tunas, and then she started working in the NFT, was one of the 2 companies based in Noro, particularly the fleet, the fishing one, and she is the manager of the fleet at the moment there, and it's a place where a lot of things happen. It's a very unique place in the Pacific world, and it's, as we like to say, a bit of a condensation of all what you can happen in the Pacific in terms of fishing industry in one port. I recommend anyone who has interest in fishing in the Pacific to go and spend some time in order to see what fishing should be in the Pacific, in my opinion. And finally, Bo Bigla, which is somebody who I've spent quite a lot of time over the last 3 years, since I'm spending 100 days a year in the Marshall Islands, working with him. He's been so far the only fisheries officers that I have done work on board. I have cycled to go to do the inspections, and then we went for a surf after that. And in the near future, we go paddling in a canoe, since we have now a canoe club in the Marshalls. If you know me, those things are important as I work. So he's a very bright man, very committed, a total waterman, and you may know a big part of the success we had and the change we had in Marshall Islands with the implementation of our port states measures, best practices, has been based on his work and his support. The latest one last year, I think his work, we found a vessel that was not doing the right thing, and that is bringing what a big substantial income in terms of fines to the organization he represents, which is Mindra. So the panel here is basically, I will make some questions to them, and then they will answer to me. And I also pretend to have some dialogue among them on things. Saurara will be most from the industry and processing, Mark from, both from the boarding and the front line with the vessels, and Cynthia on what is to manage 3 fleets at once during this COVID time. So very much happy to see them here and to be talking to them. Saurara, can I make you the first question? How have you seen the impact of COVID directly on the processing side? Because one thing is to catch fish, but the processing side is the one that get the fish and then sends it off where it has to be. Particularly the situation in Fiji and in Kiribati, where you're mostly comfortable.
Yeah, thank you very much, Francisco, first of all, for the very generous introduction. And yeah, thank you so much for that. You have our total respect from the Pacific, from myself and the Pacific Islanders that I know, that I've worked with you over the years. Jumping straight into the first question for today, I would just like to bring some light onto one of the areas of export that has been adversely affected by COVID-19. I will be speaking especially in terms of the experience from Fiji and some from Kiribati, where the 2 countries where I've mostly worked. And yes, fresh fish export in particular is one of those that has been affected. Just for your information, majority of the locally owned and managed fishing companies here, specifically in Fiji, rely heavily on fresh fish exports as a main commodity. And this could be due to several reasons. Just, highlighting 4 of them. Some because, the operations around fresh fish processing is easier to manage in comparison to others. The freighter services for it are more frequent. And the fact that not all vessels are equipped to stay out at sea for longer periods of time. And, apart from the fact that returns much faster for fresh fish. Talking to some of the industries, yes, this has been largely affected in the case of Fiji, and I'm sure in other parts of the Pacific. So this, because of COVID-19, you have a lot more of these fresh fishing vessels that are alongside the wharves and are not in operations at the moment. And as a direct result of that, there have been quite a number of people that have lost their jobs. Those in the most unfortunate circumstances. Otherwise, those that have managed to keep their jobs are on reduced working hours. And in terms of local consumption, those have been largely affected. Those that are linked somehow to the tourism industry. And yes, and that also affects those other services providers down the line that are now barely keeping their heads above the water, and some even going out of businesses. So yeah, Francisca, I don't know how much time you have to this. I do have some other issues that around this that I want to discuss, but I'm conscious of time. You could always bring some of those things up later as well. But yes, fresh fish is export is one of those that is largely affected by this COVID-19.
Yeah, this is an area that later on Brett will touch, so it's good that you introduced it himself. But yeah, if you want to have anything else that you want to bring up, please do so. We have a bit of time because unfortunately Kikiba couldn't be with us, so we will listen to this time among us.
Okay.
So, go for it.
Yeah, thank you, Francisco. So yeah, so like I mentioned, because of most of these boats are not in operation, they start to rust, and these incurs a lot of expenses to maintain them. So when business is not good right now, this means that most of these expenses would be almost added to like the fixed cost of business because it's ongoing. And yeah, for fresh fish in particular, as some of you might be aware, USA is the main market. And right now, because of COVID, there are a lot of uncertainties in this market. And just for the sake of maintaining these markets, some of these businesses may be forced to keep on sending small amounts of fish, just so that they keep their customers don't run away to another supplier. And yeah, it has been so just recently, in particular in Fiji, flights have had resumed. But then when they start to send fresh fish, the freight costs are almost 3 times higher than the normal. So to counter these logistic costs in the sort of new normal of operations, companies may have no choice but to only send their premium products for export. So they could at least, like I mentioned, counter the high logistic costs that they are exposed to now. And also because of that, those fresh fish that are lower than A, for example, they have to sell them locally. And even with the local sales, yeah, they have to compete with other fish that locally sourced from additional fishermen, for example. So that leaves them in a very difficult spot. And some of these fresh fish export companies, as a probably technique to keep on surviving, now they are mainly exporting just samples out there just to test out the markets. Yeah, and yeah, that's. And
Thank
just
you,
Francis. Yes.
Yep.
Sorry, just the last
Please.
point. And while we may think that, yes, diversification into other products is a way to go, the reality of the matter is what do they actually do now? Because diversification, for those that have not done it, what do they do now to survive? And diversification really works for those that, according to the conversations I've made, it works for those that are able to source their products from multiple sources. Most of these locally owned companies, they have their own fleets to source their products from. Yeah.
Very good point. Thank you, Sarah. That's good. I will come back to you with the next question.
Thank
Cynthia. No worries. We keep discussing later. Cynthia, you are at the front line there with, and I'm literally talking the front line. Her office is in the wharf. You dealing with just to set up the scene with your own vessels, the sailors, with your own Frontliners, and with the chartered longliners. How has this whole process has affected your job? And your microphone is off.
Was enjoying listening to all that. Thanks, Francisco, and thanks again for the opportunity to be on this panel with our fellow panelists. Just to get straight into it, yes, you've highlighted the various fleets we deal with in Noro, the Poland line, the locally chartered long line, our own domestic vessels, and more recently the star loader operations brought in foreign purseaners as well that bring in their fish from international waters and the EEZ. It's been an adjustment. We've been very fortunate that we are part of an integrated organization, but we share similar impacts and challenges that I'm sure other fleets are facing in the Pacific. But we're, mostly it's just adjusting to some of the requirements and procedures that have been put in place. So I'll touch on domestic fishing operations for a start. Transform touched on a lot of the issues that we face and adjustments we're having to make, which are all very real. We only have one flight leaving the country weekly for freight. So being a remote island nation, it's one of the difficulties we face is getting freight in on time for our supplies, our parts and equipment. Documentation, as others would know, some countries that we send our shipments out to require original documentation. And if we were to get exempt from electronic copies, we have to prove that there is no flight, but we have one flight. So it makes it a bit hard to get an exemption. And if we miss that one flight cutoff, we're 2 weeks out on our documents. So they are sort of roll-on impacts outside of just, packing the fish for export here. Maintenance, another one that's affected. Technicians for specialized equipment can't be flown in for maintenance or repair. Dock schedules, they're out for the whole year, which puts next year's vessels out. So there's a lot of things we have to adjust around, but we're still very grateful that we are in a position where we can still operate our vessels with these adjustments. We touch on crew a lot, and we have some international crew on our vessels. These are the domestic vessels, and where we would have them do 6 month on, 3 month off rotation. Some have been on for over a year, and it's they're grateful to be on board and still have the opportunity to earn and send money back to their families. But it is an adjustment. It's a challenge to be away from family for quite a long period of time. Let alone others on foreign vessels that spend longer out at sea. Yeah, our domestic guys can still come on shore. This leads me to some of the foreign vessels we're dealing with. It's also a change for them to not be able to just step off the boats when they come into port. Some of them are necessary, some of them are the requirements put on us by the authorities to have these vessels come into port. But despite being approved coming into port, some of these requirements don't allow crew to get off the vessels. So while they're alongside us, we can talk to them, they can't step off the boats, and I'm sure that's a huge impact on the crew. There's numerous things that we have had to adjust to, but still being able to do our jobs, we're very grateful for. And one of the things Transform touched on was just overall a slowdown or a delay as such. Days at sea will be reduced because prior to arriving, you've got to do all these documentational screening. Once they arrive, you've got the physical screening by the health authorities. Some vessels aren't allowed stevedores on board, so the crew have to do the unloading themselves. And particularly with the foreign purseaners, if they're used to having stevedores on board to unload, and now they're not allowed, it really slows down the unloading days, and it increases their days in port. And if you miss the cutoff for the export shipment, you've got to plug those in for the next one, and the costs add up. So these are sort of the operational adjustments and the costs that we have to bear. But we've been fortunate that, the COVID hasn't come out of quarantine or isolation where our active cases are. And we just hope that, it stays that way. And, we don't mind doing these adjustments as long as we can continue with our operations.
Thank you, Cynthia. That's been very illuminating to have you giving your opinion on what's happening there. And I rescue something that you said the other day, that even the affecting issues like sending original documents, which is a requirement for many countries, that you actually have no flights, so there is no couriers. So people go, where's the original document? So you have to explain that there is no opportunity to send an original document. So the impacts, it's the small things. People think about the big things, but it's the small things that accumulate. So thank you very much for that. Bo, how you doing? I see this guy every year, every day, and now pretty much I haven't seen him since December last year. So how has all this thing has affected your job, man?
Yeah, thank you, Francisco. Thank you for the question, and thank you for the organizers of this meeting for allowing me to share my work on this platform. So if I may just summarize, quickly summarize just sort of 4 major phases of how this COVID has affected our MCS operations in port. First, it was the stopping of transshipment monitoring, which prior to this, we covered around 99% of these transshipments in the previous years, in some years over 500 transshipments. Secondly, we stopped onboard boarding clearances for vessels that were coming in. And of course, we had to pull off our observers who were going on trips. And then we started to see a large reduction in vessel port entries. The lowest point was May this year. Last year, 2019 May, we had 54 carriers and purseaners that came in May. This year, we had only 7. I think it was 5 purseaners and 2 carriers, so only 7 came in this year. I think overall, this reduces our ability to verify transshipments in ports. Little things like fixing log sheets and other documentations take more time to do. I think it weakens the verification process that we have in the chain of custody and our role that we play. And obviously, for me, one of the big ones is there's no MCS presence on these vessels while they're in our port, which is very important to our operation here. Although serious incidences in port are uncommon, we think having a presence on the vessels is still a deterrence, and we still have vessels coming in. And I think I described it to you once as having an itch on your back that you can't really reach, and you know that operation is going on and you had to scale back the MCS work. But I think the industry has done a good job to communicate with us to meet some of these COVID SOPs to allow for what we can import. So that's the summary from my side. Thank you.
Thanks, thanks, Bo. Yeah, I remember last year I was pretty busy. So Bo will be the guy who basically do 4 or 5 boardings for riding vessels with intelligence analysis, and from going from 54 in May to 7, it must be quite surreal. The image behind you is the lagoon of Majuro with over 40 vessels at once, and this was a few years ago. Now I've seen it from satellite images, and it's pretty empty, so it must be quite sad. Plus the impact that this has on the fact that all these vessels will come and people will come into town and people will buy stuff in the supermarkets, and will have a very wrong, really long impact on. Now, the next thing, because I was interested, is how this is affecting, because we're talking about the big picture and stuff like that, but this is affecting you guys every day in your personal lives. So I just was interested to see how this also affecting, Sarara, you have 2 kids, Cynthia, you have little Ezra there, Mark, you have your daughter. How is this affecting your job? How, you have to go on board, you have to interact with people, and then you have to come home with, to your daughter in a country where the hospital facilities are very limited. So I'm just putting one example there. How is this affecting your everyday life, mate? I start with Mark and then I go for Cynthia and Saurabh. Yep.
Sorry, Francisco, did you say I was first?
Yes.
Oh, okay, sorry. Yeah, so for one, I think my family likes it because I'm here. This is the longest I've been home for this long stretch of time. But how it has affected my work in that regard is that we're used to, having in-person meetings, and now we're just on Zoom all the time. I think just last week was my first triple Zoom where I had 3 Zooms running and had to sort of try to work through that. At the same time, you're physically here in your office. So although you might be in an important meeting, somebody will burst in your door and ask you to do some other work and things like this, just little things like that. And I think having online platforms, we're somewhat lucky to have that we're able to do during these times, but at the same time, it doesn't really have a human feel to it. And it's easy to get information, but it's sometimes hard to focus when, unlike when you're in a physical meeting. So I think we were also having to participate in important meetings, such as when you're discussing fishing access license and days with bilateral partners and other important meetings. It would be more appropriate to do in person, I think. So thanks.
Cynthia, how has this affected you personal life? You know, we are our jobs in the Pacific in many ways.
Yeah, well, for me personally, you know, I think it's just the lack of travel. My partner Edmund, as you know, he's from the Philippines, and with an ill father, it's one of the things that's personally affecting us is just not being able to have him come home, or my son to see his grandparents. But you know, I'm sure that I'm not the only one in that position. But personally, aside from, you know, the adjustments we're having to make at work, that's probably one of the impacts that's affecting us. But you know, we have the technology, we're speaking with them every day, so we're doing the best we can with what we've got.
Thank you, Cynthia. Saurada, you know, besides doing all the jobs you do there, you're a consultant as well that travels. So how is this affecting? On one side, you get to spend time with your kids. On the other side, this is affecting your personal life as well. How is this working for you?
Yeah, thank you for that, Francisco. It's interesting to hear from my colleagues here as well. And for me, it's this COVID has brought a lot of mixed emotions. On one hand, you know, I'm so glad that I have an opportunity to work from home and be hands-on with my 2 young children. And noting that, you know, I could be gone when things get better. So on the other hand, you know, I walk into the place where I used to work before, and I no longer see some of my colleagues, and it's really kind of devastating for me. You know, these are people who have worked in these industries for you know, 10 to 30 years. And just thinking about the real impacts of this in terms of emotions, you know, psychological impacts that this COVID has brought about. And I'm thankful to the technology that we have, that we can manage to connect, to keep in touch with our loved ones, our colleagues around the region. And yes, otherwise, I'm really glad to be home. And like our colleagues have mentioned here, I haven't been home for this long in over the last 3 years.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you for that. Just for the last question, I want to sort of like try to leave on a positive note. And I remind everyone listening to us that please, there is a question and answer section. So all questions write them there and they will be answered there. Now, last questions I have for you, and I start with Sarada, then Cynthia, then Mark, is that from all this, is any positive that you can rescue coming out of this? Is any opportunity that we can rescue coming out of this? Like a short and sweet answer. What is that for you, Sarada? Any positive?
Yes,
you
for
mentioned
me,
technology.
the positive, yeah, but probably that's not my positive answer. Yeah, so for me, really personally, my positive thing about this is just to sit back, you know, and realize that there are certain important things that, you know, we have put aside in our urge to continue with our work and all these things. And those are really important things that at the end of the day, when things, you know, go as the way they have been during COVID, those are the things that we fall back on, and that's, you know, family, the family, quality family time for me. That's something that I've learned during this whole COVID period.
Ninaka Saurara, I appreciate your answer. Cynthia, what do you risk as a positive opportunity of this?
Opportunity-wise, I think, you know, just dealing with the difficulties of getting documentation out on time, I think it presents an opportunity to be able to do electronic documents and do away, you know, if we can, with physically mailing pieces of paper around. We've got so much technology being developed in the fishing industry, right, from like electronic monitoring, electronic reporting. I think this is a good time to start looking at, you know, the export documentation being electronic as well, and you know, it would really reduce delays on clearing cargo in at the destination ports. That's one of the opportunities I think we can get out of this.
Thank you, Thomas, Cynthia, and we'll talk later, but yeah, say hello to the family.
Thank you, Francisco.
Positives out of this, mate. Well, besides that, you don't see my face often.
We wish you were here. Yeah. So, as I had mentioned, we had a low of 7 vessel entries in May, as far as port entry. But sometime after that, we actually developed a web application for port entry. So this was quite revolutionary for us, because we essentially, it's for the agents to apply online, and as soon as they click hit, it goes to the relevant agencies, including Ministry of Health, of all these information, and we're able to comment on where this boat is coming from and all the things that were keeping them from coming in. So not only is it going to be something we're going to be using in fisheries after hopefully all this is over, but it's good for it. Pretty much streamline the process, so there's not so much misinformation and one questioning all these things. So just from that, we sort of got rid of some of the issues that were up against the vessels trying to come here. So we started seeing entries go up. I think most we've had after that was, I think, close to 30, which is quite good for now, but we're still working on it. We're still constantly making changes, but yeah, it's good for the MCS work we have.
Como tata, my friend. Como tata, I appreciate the answer. So yeah, looking forward to catch up at some stage. So guys, thank you so much for this opportunity to talk. I wish it was in person, but yeah, I think that you bring a very fresh perspective of what's happening there. That people, there are over 135 people that is listening to this. Really, really appreciate it. Thank you very, very much. I appreciate it. Now, continue with the show. Everyone has been talking about the impact of this in many ways and the lack of observers, etc., etc. But there is not only an impact on the lack of observers for information to be provided, but on the life of these observers, who are around 800 in the Pacific and Arctic, that we may not have when we come back to this. So for this, I was very, very happy to see that SIFA, who pretty much trained or been involved in the training of every observer since 1942, not really, but many, many observers in the region. Everyone who has been on a boat or works with observers will know SIFA. He works with SPC, and I'm very much looking forward to his presentation. SIFA, floor is yours, mate. You're on mute, SIFA, so you need to get off the mute when you can. There we go, mate.
Yeah. Good afternoon to everyone there. Bonjour from Pacific Community headquarters here in Noumea, New Caledonia. SPC's principal scientific and technical organization. supporting development of the Pacific region in many areas, agriculture, health, and especially fisheries here. Thanks again, Francisco, for inviting me. If you can have a look at, I hope I'm not the only one who have a PowerPoint presentation here, but if you have a look at the region there, the Pacific Ocean, probably already mentioned before, is the largest tuna fisheries in the world. 55% of the world tuna catch, very large. Some are very large to a very small exclusive economic zone there. My talk today will be just focused on that ocean and then also the employment for Pacific Islanders, and that's a fisheries observer. A little bit of background there. Pacific Island Regional Fisheries Observer. 2008, the FFA, FFC 67 adopted the Pacific Island Regional Fisheries Observer. Observer is the first entry to observer work. And then from there on, they called for further development of the PEFO, including debriefing operation. And then early this year, we upgraded the training of observer to level 3, certificate 3 in observer operation, and also certificate 4 in debriefing operation. As you can see there, these are all the observer program around the region. Is about from a large observer program, the small one. PNG will be the biggest observer program, around 258. Kiribati 171 observers. And we're going to be talking about these observers. They are unemployed at the moment. And the rest of other observer programs like FSM, Solomon, Marshall Island, Tuvalu, Nauru, there are some of them between 80 to 100 observers. And then on the other side, you got Cook Island, Fiji, Tonga. They're more subtropical, they're more focused on the long line. They also have observer maybe range from 20 to 30. So these are 800 observers, total number there. Most of them are employed under the national program. And then the other two sub-regional programs, the P&A Observer Agency and also the US Treaty. As you may be aware, observer is the eyes and ears of fisheries there. It's around 20% yearly turnover on observers. Every year we train observers just to keep that number there for the 100% observer coverage on the per scene and also the 5% on the long line. Some figures here, we managed to extract some of the data from the sea days on long line, excluding some of the distant water. This is probably come out of the Toughmen 2 on the number of trips and number of sea days. If you have a look at it on 2018, it's around over 10,000 sea days there, and the same with 2019. If you have a look at what we receive on all the observer data enter here, there might be a bit of delay there, so some trips might, if you have a look at it, it's down just under 4,000 there on the long line sea days there. So on the other side, if you have a look at the Persane, very similar how we got this from our system. The number of trips has been reported here. Record in the government too for 2018. If you have a look at it, it's more like around each month there, around 6,000. It's dropped down. Sorry, 2019 there. Pretty much level up there. And then if you have a look at 2020 there, this is the number of trips of like what I said before, it might have been, some must be haven't submitted to us to enter into the system over here. But if you have a look at, I think it was started, observers start coming back in March, April, and then towards the end of July, August. You have a look at it in September is almost most of the observers are back either on land or back in at home. So if you have, what I did a little bit of calculation based on what we got here in our system over here. I mean, I just took the average there of 2018 and 19, pretty much approximate there. And then work it out for 2020 is more like just over 6,000 sea days there lost. So if you want to convert it to some sort of dollars there, this is just not really it is a layman term there. You'll be looking about just over 300,000 US dollar. That's a lot of money. Because most of the observer now has come back or due to restriction. And then if you have a look at Persane, so what I did with the 2018 and 2019 and then get an average there. And then the sea days, what we collected this year, like what I said before, I will stress it a little bit. There are some trips haven't been submitted. So we're looking about just over 60,000 sea days there for 2000 and lots of sea days. So if you want to equate that to income, you're looking about over 3 million US dollars there. This is from the US treaty for 2018 and 19. There's a number of sea days there. If you have a look at it, both for 2018 and 19, pretty much 2018 over 7,000. And then 2019 there's over 6,000. If you have a look at what the been supplied by the US treaty FFA, you look at this, only 2,000 sea days there for, or up to last month. Or so if you have a look at the PNA Observer Agent, they supply this one here. If you have a look at all the sea days there, Persane, and also the other one there is also there's 30+% of fish under the US treaty. I'm not quite sure how many Persane, probably some of the fish under PNA. The last time I think was over 80 plus. That's probably last year when I got the record. But if you have a look at it, 2016, 17, and 18, and 19, and if you have a look at it, it's pretty much around 20,000 there from 2016 to last year. And then this year, if you have a look at it, it's almost half of it, it's only 10,000. If you have a look at that, November, there's 0, December, most of the observers are either back at home or stranded somewhere waiting for the borders to open. So if you have a look at it, when you plot the graph there for 2020, just tell you the story there. There are a lot of observers sitting there at home, waiting for hopefully to open up the borders and then go back to sea. The impact of COVID, I think, is just looking at it is some observers probably they've been waiting for 5-6 months since March. Some probably gone away and look for other job, and hopefully they will come back when things are open up. But that's the impact of COVID on observers' work. So if you have a look at it, the observer income there, work is primary employment for, like I say, the hundreds of observers there, Pacific Islanders. So assuming that 45 fishing days they are undertake annually. This is the subject there, talking about the P&A observer program. So when you equate that, they come to 65 days at sea. So when you work it out, the economics with different observer program have their own rate, and then doesn't include short days. So when you come in, you want to do a back-to-back trip. Sometimes you stay on land for a week or even more than that. Observers still get paid, so probably it doesn't include you. So we looking at $80 US a day. So there's a lot of short days, and then also MCSC days, MSC, sorry, COC there. So if you equate that one there, a full year of shut down the observer program or the P&A POA there, you're looking at least over $5 million there. So that's a big loss there. And then the 3-month suspension, you'll be looking at 1.3 there. So additional income will be lost. There are other tiers of debriefers, trainers, placement officers. All these people are unemployed at the moment. And also transshipping, mentioned before. If we have a look at the number of observer trained over the years, this took last year we trained plus at the national and sub-regional, there were 25 new recruits last year. This year we only got 16 there. It's mainly New Caledonia because we base here, we can't travel anywhere. And then also 6 from French Polynesia. We did the training there in Feb, and then we left a couple of days later, and they got their first COVID-19. So if you have a look at it, it's quite a big number there, trying to maintain the number there. What we're doing at the moment, we are planning more like a virtual training using Zoom, and at the same time set up some sort of online on the Moodles there. And then we try to do some sort of hybrid training. And with the aim, hopefully next year will open up, because some of you probably aware that training observer is not only classroom, you got to get out there. It's more a lot of hand-on training, touch the fish and all of it. So this is what we are doing at the moment, and then improve and update some of the material, and then yeah, we keep ourselves busy here, and also planning first training in early next week. So we're looking about 5 countries with 5 participants from each country. So just highlighted there, 95 last year, it's only 16 so far we trained this year. Some of you probably are aware of this FFC 114, I think they've been tasked to have a look at sustaining the observer livelihood there. I think one of the solutions is just to go back to open up things and 100% observer coverage on the person. There are other recommendations there came out of the report by Emmerich. Look at other unspent funds. Discuss with over here, SPC, WCPFC, planning for opportunity to contribute to funds. Probably appointed a dedicated person there who responsible for coordinating, processing opportunities, but progressing opportunities. But at the moment, we got a fairly good network. We got an observer coordinator, probably we can go through them. And then other shore observer in the design, long-term onshore, MCS, fisheries awareness, just to get some of the observer doing biological sampling, shore facility transshipping, maybe tag recovery. They're looking at a way to, we can't really get all these 800 observer to be employed, but, and then maybe some creation of job on board type online forum, maybe connect short-term engagement, maybe do a lot of refresher training, and then get some of the observer to get paid out of it. Just some update here. It's our network with most of our program. PNG, if you look at it, they're still doing cover some of the local bilateral fishing boats, fishing in the EEZ. Tuvalu observer all return home, no placement. Solomons, they still cover some of the boats out of Noro. FSM in Marshall, I think you heard from Mark there, is everything seems to be shut down. Yeah, I think that's all I got, but I think if you have a look at the impact of COVID on the observer and their work is huge there. And what I'm afraid now is most observers have been sitting there for months and months. They might end up going and look for other job, and they might like it, they don't want to go out to sea. So it's a big task to go back and train hundreds of observers in a short period of time. So I think we will prepare for it if it's happened. But this the impact of COVID at the moment. So it's a lot of loss. So if you have a look at that, the PNA observer program, the US, there's a lot of, when you convert all this to money, and then unemployment by observer is huge. It's huge. It's affect observers. So I think that's all I got there, unless anybody have a question there.
Definitely. Thank you, Sifa. There's some very sobering numbers you put there, mate. Some very sobering graphs as well. Because, while the focus has been a lot on the level of uncertainty that the lack of data brings to issues around fisheries management and science, just the level of uncertainty this brings to the livelihood of, over 800 people in the Pacific, it's just like really, really sobering, and that's really pleased that you are here to tell us the story, which is a story that normally doesn't get out, and people don't see it. So very thankful for your presentation. Okay. I'm sure that the next speaker, Glenn, will bring something of those issues there, but definitely I'm sure that I will have questions for you after that. The next speaker is for 100 days a year, is my direct boss in the Marshall Islands. Is the big man at MIMBRA, but also the chairman of the Parties of the Nauru Agreement. It's one of the few people that actually has been at that level, that has to spend time at sea. And that's something also that I didn't mention on about Transform. It's one of the few people at his level that actually has decided to spend time on a fishing boat. And even if it was only that, the only thing I knew about them, that would be more than a reason to respect him. In the case of Glenn, he has been a very strong supporter of my work, and I'm always been very thankful to him for that. Furthermore, he has the best coffee machine of any fishing office in the Pacific, so I always find a reason to go and talk to him. Glenn, you're most welcome, and we're looking forward to hear you. Are you there, Glenn? I can see your name, but I don't see your face or your voice. Maybe if you can go and sit at the boss office, that will help.
Sorry, Chico, he just left my office. I'll run over there and
All right. Anyway, so part of the deal when you deal with technology. So what can we do? There you go. Hey, there
Hey,
you go,
Francisco.
boss. Yeah, thank you for. I was worried about.
Yeah, no, I jumped over to Bo's computer because mine crashed. I'm trying to set up my share screen and it freezes.
Okay.
Who
no
do you
worries.
have
Yeah.
next? Can you give me a minute, or after the next presentation I can go after?
Good. Brett, will you be able to, as we do in fishing, save the boat night? Can you come in with your presentation and then we get Glenn at the end?
Sure, Francisco. I'll jump in here.
Thank you. I'll introduce you. I was very happy to see that Brett could speak here because he more than anyone will tell you what is the impact on the domestic tuna industry, which has been massive. Furthermore, former fisherman itself, that is always very important for me. And at a personal level, we have stories about this this pandemic. He is part of one of mine. The family I normally stay in the Marshall Islands, which is kind of like my second family, was on my way to New Zealand to come and visit me because, you know, I stay at the house that they were supposed to come here to stay with me. And they decided to spend 4 days in Fiji on the way here. They got stuck there because borders were closed. They couldn't go back to the Marshalls. They couldn't come here. So I sent an email to a few friends that I have in Fiji asking for help. And Brett was first off the block. They can come and stay at my house. And I'm never going to be able to say enough thank you for that, Brett. So thank you very much. Very much listening to what you have to say.
Thank you, Francisco. Thank you for the introduction. Let me just get technological here and get my slide up. So I share screen.
Yep.
Cool. It should be. Sorry, it should be. I'm not sure why it's not going to full screen. I'll do a new share, I think. Let's try this. Okay, how's that, Francisco?
Yep. That seems to be working, Mike.
Right. Okay, thank you again. Sorry for the short delay. Okay, coming from a man of a few hats, or caps, as they say.
Can we hear you?
You can't hear me? What's going on here? You can't hear me?
Sorry, Brett. Yeah, we can hear you well.
Oh, great. So I'll continue. Right. I'll try and keep this brief. A lot of what I've put here has been brought to our attention through Dr. T, Sorara, but jumping in here. Going to next slide. Okay, so our challenges with harvesting. I'm going to get into the challenges in fish harvesting. So our markets have been significantly affected by the way of border restrictions and lockdowns. I think that's been pretty well documented. Also has the 2.5 to 3-fold increase in air freight with no government intervention, such like Australia giving freight subsidies, just for an example of what may or could be done. We have to pay our freight prior to making the shipment and on a committed quantity, irrespective of whether we make that shipment or not, or whether it's less. And if it's more, we have to hope that there's space, but we haven't had that good problem actually. Reduction in logistic routings, so we're a lot more restricted on the days that we can unload. Recruiting and repatriation of key vessel personnel, captains and engineers, etc. Crew. Reduced observer coverage, risking hard fought and expensive independent certifications such as MSc. Continuing on, haven't received any targeted assistance from government so far, despite different associations making submissions on how best to assist the industry. Still working on that. Years of efforts towards transparency and using blockchain in the tuna supply chain, being pushed by the domestic companies trying to set themselves apart from distant water nations, may be ruined due to the lack of funding options. Mounting debts due to lack of revenue and escalated interest costs will lead some companies towards bankruptcy. Yeah, I'm not going to shout this out. I did put it in caps, but you know, this is an extremely serious situation for the truly domestic companies that have no offshore parent or overseas HQ, or, and we're left foreseeing years of investment in local employment and human connections, as Sorara pointed out earlier. You know, our extended family. It's all at serious risk of financial peril, and a generation of experience possibly being left unemployed or finding employment elsewhere will leave the industry facing a perpetual loss. So we need targeted assistance. So we need it now. Thank you again for this forum that gives us the opportunity to share our challenges and really the awareness that it brings about may bring some more light and some change to the current situation. Just quickly on fishing vessel finance challenges. I mean, yeah, all bank policies, basically there's no facilities to lend on vessels. That was there pre-COVID to a certain extent, but now it's more you know, the bank policies that some local banks actually did hold some security on fishing vessels, but have removed it altogether, and that's had quite a impact on gearing, and even the international corporate banks and even the international development banks are requiring more equity to lend when equity has actually been reduced due to the impacts of the pandemic. So it's like asking for an umbrella and instead they throw another bucket of water on you. But the COVID challenges in processing, well, as has been highlighted, there's been a dramatic reduction in volumes due to many vessels being tied up or having reduced operations due to the disruptions. A loss of key personnel as they find employment outside of the fish processing industry. These are usually, qualified, trained persons that can, fortunately for them, move into other industries. But again, it's a loss to our industry. So that loss of human capital equals loss of prior training costs and future cost recovery that we were relying on to cover. You don't train somebody and that's it. Then you have to actually get that cost recovery through their future employment. So that's quite a biggie. But working on solutions, we're not just waiting for things to turn back to normal. But even prior to COVID-19, some industry members were working on projects to enhance transparency in the tuna supply chains using blockchain technology for the transfer of information from catch to consumer, with an aim to create efficiencies in the supply chain that could translate into a more equitable return to the Pacific, but just as importantly, pushing out IUU fish from entering the legitimate supply chain. The goals was to create a completely transparent and traceable supply chain solution using the innovative blockchain technology for the fresh and frozen tuna supply chain. And this is to get personal, and thanks to Francisco and his daughter, in fact, who really captures in my simplistic view of things how we keep IUU fish out of our pathway to the market. So thanks again, Francisco's daughter, for that. Now, those who don't know about blockchain revolution, I'm not going to go too far into it, except this sort of simple diagram. Also, just it's web. We've gone from web 1 to 2 to this is 3, decentralized and distributed ledger that's verified by multiple computers, and yeah, that's it works. The proof of concept is there, and it's trusted data. So just to capture the process from start to finish, the fish, or tuna in this case, is landed, tagged at the landing. Now, not to get confused between a boat and a wharf. So I just want to highlight that the vessel landing, this is as the fish lands on the vessel, not the vessel landing at port. This is quite new. Nobody's done it in the long lining sector, but this is how it works. So it's tagged at catch. So as soon as the fish is landed, it's as you can see there, it's got a QR code at number 1. Number 2, that information can be uploaded through different technologies when the vessel does land, or even prior to, when it comes into cell phone range. During the processing, the fish can be tracked right through with its unique QR code. And logistics, they can be part of the process. So so it moves there to obviously through wholesalers or distributors at the marketplace to the consumer, who can, if enabled, can verify all of that information, starting right back at the story of the fish landing on the vessel. So there's a lot of transparent information there that does bring challenges to the old supply chains.
I think we lost Brett, unfortunately. Maybe we should get to Glenn and then ask Brett to finish. What do you think of Infofish? Is that the way to go?
Yes, Francisco, please
Good.
Go ahead. Yeah.
We try to get in touch with Brett.
Yeah.
So Glenn, are you able to take on the role? Can you hear me, Glenn?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Good. Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
sorry about that earlier. That's the challenge with technology here.
We know. It's good to see you, Glenn. It's good to see you.
Yeah.
It's just to speak.
Good to see you. Nice to meet everyone. Thank you for the opportunity. Can you see my screen?
In a very weird way, we see it, but it's like a very long one. You should kind of press some buttons to bring it up.
Again, such is the challenge, yeah? Are we there?
I think that you should be trying to press the play button of the presentation somewhere so it comes up. Looks like a very long screen.
It's on my screen. Is it on yours?
Sorry, Glenn, maybe if I operate the presentation because I have a copy of it, and then you can just talk from your side. Is that okay?
Okay, sure. Go ahead.
Okay.
Thanks.
That's the way to go.
Yeah.
Thank you, Happy. Minaka. Good.
Right.
Again, thanks, and thanks, Abby. Hi, Francisco, everyone. I see Saurara, Pam, Sifa, and over 128 participants, including our dear friend, Dr. Transform, and the previous panel, Cynthia, Mark, everyone. Good to see you online, applying the new norm. So I've been asked to at least provide, from my perspective, what is the impact of COVID-19 on the observer coverage, or rather the lack of per-sane observer coverage, to be more specific. So we'll go with the next slide, please. We all know how we collect data. Data is important. I need not explain why. More importantly, how we collect it is how we share it as well, in various forms, from the fishing vessels, longline and purse seine, the log sheets, the vessel monitoring system for some of us who have built-in system for weekly reports when fishing in zone, but more or less also ease at catch with discretion, and appears to be incomplete in terms of fishing from port to port, especially the distant water fishing nations. And why? We all know for science, for stock assessment, national obligations for the regional effort in stock assessment in our area, particularly the WCPFC. Other reasons for compliance, management, and social and environment, and of course, for the PNA and the Pacific, the economics behind the fishery. Very important in terms of the effort to sustain the fishery. Next slide, please. So just to give you a picture of the fishing effort from the WCPO purse seine effort, as measured by the VMS from 2015 to 2020, a snapshot, if you will. Fishing is still active, still going on, despite the suspension of the observers. So it's important to have this picture in your mind that all appears to be, at least in fishing sense, normal, given the COVID and the suspension of observers. Put that in your mind as we go to the next slide. And by way of comparison, looking at the albacore also, by the VMS picture, more or less the same. Although I think the tropical tuna, longline and, big eye and yellowfin might have a different impact because of the market reactions and the impact on market closures, contractions, etc., by the market states in Japan, elsewhere, given the COVID impact as well. Next slide, please. This is one way to present it in terms of the CFA's presentation. What's the hype? Why do we have all these observers? Again, for our regional organization, especially SPC, in the stock assessment and all the other analysis that they put behind the tropical tuna fisheries, both longline, purse seine, and all facets of it, target and bycatch, environmental parameters, etc. So a very simple table, but I guess if we have to, and as Siva said, and attested to by SPC, we have to stack this up in terms of a room with all the data collected. I think it'll be a 3-story or 5-story building with all the data so far collected by our observers. Next slide, please. So the suspension. Keyword here is the temporary suspension in terms of the observers as impacted by the COVID-19. Slowly, it starts to decline against the fishing vessels, the picture I showed earlier, against the VMS measure. And so continues to decline until now, very limited observers. There are still reports of observers out there, but more or less on the domestic front where vessels are fishing from home port to home port. Limited as they are, I think the old message is that data is on the gradual and eventual decline for the observer's duty. Next slide, please. So what does it mean if it goes on longer than usual. I know we're all hoping that one day it'll all go away and that all will go back to normal. How long, when is the question. We don't know. So things like stock assessment for now, the impact of these insufficient report or lack of report, or because of the suspensions, no observer report, insufficient data for tuna species composition on the per se vessels, insufficient data for tuna size composition for the per se vessels, and the other duties that they do sometimes that complement stock assessment, biological sampling, including port sampling, in our case, having to go on board, use all the other reports, including log sheets, VMS, to be able to sample data that are at port, either offloading or transshipping. Other critical data are perhaps foregone as well, or at least being impacted for purposes of looking at it from the science perspective, environmental and bycatch, species of interest, sharks, cetaceans, etc., and vessel behavior. This has both observers' personal perspective as well as the norms, say for example, the fat closure, and amongst other things, compliance issues. And we can go on and on and on with compliance issues in the absence of observer placement, but I think we all understand what's at stake. Next slide, please. So the temporary suspension, as our friend from SPC, Mr. Sifa, says, they are our eyes and ears. For now, none since February 2020. Moving forward, the estimated loss of income likely in the order of 5.2 million. Again, we don't know moving forward how long. Specific things like the fat closure can really have a spin, you know. Reports that you know, monitors pre-onset ban, etc., would be their words against ours, per se. Apologies to those who take this as an offense, but this is, again, in the absence of observers providing data, the perception. For how long? We can only pray. Solutions for the stock assessment, they probably need to be looking at the model differently in the stock assessment, you know, in the absence of the observer data. Other data would need to be looked at in terms of processing or cannery receipt. I think this is a request, an outstanding one. More work needs to be added to it, but I think it's time that we make headways in connecting the marketing state and the processing data to be able to complement stock assessment. Other solutions might be on the horizon, e-reporting or e-monitoring. Reality is it's still a debate. And I don't know how long this debate will go on, although we all look at it from a complementary perspective as the way to go, but very little has been done in the region, if not very slow. Or else we can wait for the COVID vaccine to provide for a safe work environment. I don't know if you're all following the news out of US, but 95% safe, so they say. Some of these vaccines that are on trial and are on the final stages of, I guess, rollout. The question in everyone's mind, from the scientists and of course right down to the observers themselves, how long? From the observer's perspective in asking this question, they're broke. The observer duty they provide is not only a solution for us in terms of the stock assessment and of course compliance and management, but a job security for them too. And since February to now and moving forward for another 12 months or longer, the estimated value, and I think SPC CFO already touched on in terms of income, 5.2 million. That's a lot of money. Next slide, please. Finally, the observer suspension. Of course, we know the effect that it has for themselves financially, and the data collection that they provide for at the national level, regional level, for all facets of management, science, and compliance, seriously being undermined if it prolongs any further. With a caveat there, resumption of observers is a must. Observer coverage should be implemented as soon as safe, practical, and COVID protocols can be put in place. There is one. Unfortunately, it's not being regionally accepted, I think. And so one observer program, national perspective from the marshals, we have about 50 observers. They're all sitting ducks, waiting for the regional, I guess, go in terms of resumption. Again, when, we don't know. Thank you very much, Francisco.
Sorry, Francisco, are you there?
He's stuck. I think I passed on to him my technological disease.
Yes,
Sorry, Francisco, we can't hear you. Yes, I think, Brad, you can continue with your presentation while we get Francisco back on.
Okay, Uppy, yeah, sorry for that. Could you tell me which slide I was on so I'm not repeating myself? Well, I think just for continuation, I hope you all got that slide, basically from point of catch to consumer, verified through the blockchain technology. If publicity can help form the future we envisage post COVID-19, then it looks like we're on the right tack. You can see what I did there, bit of a dad joke, dad pun. The blockchain will not stop IUU fishing in and of itself, but it is a game-changing tool, recognised in a new FAO report that can reduce overfishing of science-based sustainable fisheries by inputting necessary and transparent quality data throughout the supply chain, pushing out IUU fish from the markets, therefore making IUU fishing practices unviable and eliminate the abhorrent undermining of human rights. What other tool can do that? Well, there's a number of tools that can assist and underlay or overlay, but it's quite a groundbreaking technology. IUU fishing in the fish court entering the supply chain poses significant risk with impacts on sustainability and therefore livelihoods, food security and economic development for the peoples of the Pacific. A blockchain-enabled supply chain can scale up and embed throughout the global seafood supply chain and even increase returns through improved efficiencies within the supply chain for a more equitable return of the tuna resource, which Pacific Islands rely on, and give every fish its own story for the benefit of the consumer. You can find out there's a number of YouTube uploads. Just simply type in WWF blockchain project and hit search, and there'll be a lot more better presentations than my one, I guess. But Vinaka, thank you, and that's my presentation. Back over to you, Francisco, if you're there.
So his computer was on freeze, so he has to restart again. He's going to join in very soon. Okay, probably I can just take one question from here. We'll jump onto the Q&A session now. We'll just take one question from here while we wait for Francisco to come back online. Probably I can start off with Cynthia. I believe you've answered this already, or maybe you can just answer this question from Kate. NFD and Salt Tuna have undertaken some programs with training, etc., to support women in recent years. Could you update us on the progress for these programs? For example, the women forklift drivers and the financial literacy program for women in cannery companies. Cynthia.
Thanks, Api. Yep. For those that weren't able to read in the replies in the Q&A, I think more detail can be elaborated on by Salt Tuna, but from my understanding, I just flicked them a quick question. They have continued the training last year for financial literacy, and the forklift training is now done in-house, as is most of the training now, including the financial literacy. This year, I think it was more focused on workplace safety, also done in-house. But yeah, I think for more information on that, Salt Tuna would be the best place to answer.
Okay. I have this question here, and I guess I'll probably open up this question to anyone that will answer. It is often said that the Pacific has its own cultural face-to-face way of discussing and resolving issues. how is this process being impacted by the pandemic, bearing in mind that discussions now have to be virtual and the quality of internet service across the countries in the region is varied. So yeah, I'll open up this question if any of the panelists would like to answer this question. Maybe Pamela would probably start off with this.
Sorry, you're broke up a bit. Can you please repeat?
Okay, yeah. It has often been said that the Pacific has its own cultural face-to-face way of discussing and resolving issues. How is this process being impacted by the pandemic, bearing in mind that discussions now have to be virtual and the quality of internet service in the region is varied?
Thanks for that. That's a very good question, and it is one that is pertinent to the work that we do in the Pacific. As you did mention, we tend to prefer the more informal approaches, talking to somebody face to face, having a discussion without the sorts of formalities that some of the meeting forums we have to engage in provide for. The margin discussions that we engage in get a lot of our work done, actually. This new virtual world has created some challenges, and we're quite mindful of that. So what we've done for this year in particular is to sort of streamline or focus on what our core issues are for a lot of these forums. One, as I mentioned previously, is to ensure that we're able to effectively participate in whatever discussions are going on. Substantively, we don't want to put ourselves in a position where we can't engage. Decisions are made, particularly that don't have our viewpoints or our interests considered. And so it's something that we're going to have to look at a bit more, particularly if the lack of access to travel or the ability to engage directly is going to open up in the new year. So for this year, at least, we have taken a more reserved or conservative approach to the issues that we do discuss, looking at things like rollovers for conservation and management measures. But again, it's something that the Pacific in particular is going to have to look at in terms of engaging in next year.
Thank you, Pamela. Anyone else wants to add on from there? So you want me to repeat the question again? That's okay. I'll give the floor now to Francisco. He's back online and take over.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hey, this is part of the challenges you were saying, that we're all these meetings normally happens and we know each other and we can see each other's faces, and suddenly you want to say something and the things freeze and you go, oh no, and you get frustrated and you want to walk out of the room, but then you need to stay. The other thing that normally happens as well is that we have this whole very choreographed set of meetings along the regions, and we all meet each other, and then there is a lot of sharing of stories and food and drinks and things common, and all that social lubricant is not there. So makes, as we know from this little experiment now, making decisions and getting out with the right decisions quite challenging sometimes. So yeah, thank you for taking over, Apit. That was very nice, and I'm sorry for having walked out. Brett, sorry for you not being able to finish your presentation. Hopefully that worked out for you as well. So I know that we are on the questions and answers screen. I don't have the questions on my screen because I'm in a very small unit at the moment by some reason. But there was one question that caught my mind, and maybe if Glenn or Transform still around, was the issue of that a lot of the MSC certification depends heavily on the issues of service on board. yet apparently they still certifying even if there is no observers on board. So how this is working from your perspective? How is it operated? Thank you.
Maybe I'll have a crack at it before transform. So the MSc certificate and for the PNA, especially the Pacifical, is a complex system of chain of custody that the observer must be trained and certified against the application of the chain of custody to be able to certify the catch for MSC that would eventually make its way through the supply chain up through to the wholesalers and the retailers through Pacifical, utilizing the what they call the GI, the geographical indicators, where in the end result, through a traceability, consumers have that confidence in terms of tracing back the fish to where it's caught, who, when, how. In the absence of the observers doing that, there are, I guess, it's limited in terms of the chain of custody, but the Pacifical, I'm not privy to the technical aspects behind it, but I understand that there are efforts behind certification of it through electronic means, temporary as it may, in the absence of observers doing the physical chain of custody certification. Hope that helps.
Thank you. I don't know if we have a transform around. Maybe see if that's his own views on this. Are you around, transform?
Yeah,
Thank you.
Francisco, and thank you, Glenn, for that. From what I understand, in terms of MSC, I think MSC itself, from what I understand, does not actually require observers to be on board. But having an independent observer program or having an independent observers to be able to verify the chain of custody is important, especially to ensure that the catch is not mixed. The real risk in an MSC trip is where you might get a mixture of the catch, and that's what an observer is there to do, to ensure that they can report that the catch is not mixed. So that is a function of the chain of custody, but it's not necessarily a requirement of MSC. And so you're in a catch-22 situation in which you want to be able to demonstrate that you have an independent, verifiable, and auditable chain of custody to show that there's no mixing. But at the same time, the MSC certification itself does not require that. So I really don't know. On balance, it's just kind of tragic, I think, that we don't have observers being able to verify that a catch is both MSC. And so there's really at the moment, there's probably self-verification. We have to go with the honesty of the captains. But there's really no way of, at this point in time, of independently having an auditable chain of custody in which the avoidance of mixtures can be verified by independent third-party observers.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. T. That was a very good answer, very straightforward. I have another question here. Arrives by text to me because I haven't promised. Maybe is this something that Glenn, you're head of being a chair plus, but also being the head of MIMBRA, and Pamela being this on the decision making as well for the cooks. I have a sense of uncertainty coming from the presentations in terms of the data that is available. Is this being incorporated into the decision making in terms of management, particularly with the impacts of climate change being so unknown? Yep, any of both. Ladies first.
Sure. Thanks for that, Francisco. And it is an important question. It's something we've been grappling with throughout this year. The points that Glenn raised in his presentation about some of the risks to not accessing this information, in particular the stuff that observers collect, is critical. I mean, in the last few years, we've seen the importance of observer data and how much they can improve and enhance our stock assessments. For example, we're able to get information that feeds the parameters that are specific to our region, not using data or information from the Eastern Pacific, for example. And that has changed the outcomes of these stock assessments. You know, one of the things that we need to look at now, and is one of the reasons why we developed the health and safety protocols for observers and vessel crew that are working in the fishing sector, is to cautiously work back into some sort of normalcy. We're quite aware that not only observers but also fishing crew have to have access to their jobs. There has to be this, we are responsible for ensuring that there is access to their livelihoods and supporting that. So the data element of it is really important, but at the same time, we're in a situation that we've never experienced before. This pandemic has thrown a whole lot of spanners at us that we still need to work through, and if we can come up with ways to collect some of this information, working with our scientists, for example, whether some of the programs that were previously established in port, for example, prior to the 100% observer coverage requirement for purse seiners, we used to have port sampling for purse seiners. We don't do that anymore because you ended up with data the observer programs and other sources. So those sorts of things we need to look at again, and what opportunities can address these temporary gaps in our access to this data.
Hi, Francisco, are you there? Yeah, are you on mute? Oh. All right.
Okay, finally, God. It's getting harder and harder. This. My mouse is the size of all the screen. I'm very sorry for all this. Thank you, Pam. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
How are we doing with time, Abhi? Because I have a couple more questions here.
Yeah, we can have 2-3 questions, maybe.
Good, thank you. I have here one from Mr. David Hammond. Thank you for the opportunity to ask a question, listen to the panel's expertise. What will be the impact of observers' livelihood if COVID-19 continues beyond mid-2021, including the effects of families and local communities? from human rights at sea. So maybe something that Sifa could answer first, and then Glenn. If Sifa is,
yeah. I think there's something maybe each program like Pamela and Glenn and them has. I don't really run program. It's up to each program. So maybe Glenn and Pamela can comment on that one. Yeah.
You're on, Sifa. Yep.
Yeah, let me have a crack at that
You there, Sifa?
question.
Okay, Glenn. You both now muted.
Yeah, okay. So I guess the question is the status, economic status, or with the observers suspension and their livelihood. Yeah. Three fronts there. One, each country has their own specific programs in terms of compensatory mechanisms. Ours, RMI, falls more or less under the US system, under the FOLO Act, where there is a compensatory mechanisms formula worked out where our observers gets to apply, and in the absence of placement jobs, etc., they are actually qualified, and they have applied and have been awarded financial packages for them in the interim. But of course, as I said, this is temporary. Again, how long, we don't know. So the question is, what are our observers doing? They find themselves without jobs, even at the agency here, on sometimes what we call a temporary labor contract to give them a float. Others have gone, finding jobs out there outside of the fishery. My worry is that at the end of this, we might have no observers, or we might have less observers, or we might need new observers to restart the data effort all over again. Again, how long will we last on this? And we are, of course, contingent on the third one, our regional partners, SPC, PNA, POA, for the various trainings and opportunities, including the previous topic, the PNA chain of custody certification, for them to be able to make earnings or income out of all these opportunities, including biological sampling. So yeah, time will tell whether we have the same observers, less observers, or no observers, and would need a reboot of all the observers. Again, the options out there, including electronic monitoring, is a good one. But it's still subject to debate, and a lot of technical aspects behind it in terms of a rollout. It'll take another couple of years for it to have a complete, robust DM monitoring system, either complementary or at worst, replacement of these observers. My personal feeling against replacement of observers is that, it's an opportunity income for our Pacific Island people. And as such, we would like to continue placement of human observers on all these fishing vessels. So time will tell. Thank you.
Excellent, Glenn. Sifa, you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, like what I said before, I mean, I think there is some sort of, like what Glenn said, package just to keep them in short term, like doing some work on shore or something like that. But I mean, I think it's up to each individual program there, as Glenn mentioned there. One program is different from the other one. Those one there, Glenn mentioned, probably aligned with the US. I'm not sure about those program. Pamela might want to talk about it. But I did mention in my talk that there's some initiative there and recommendation came out of that MREC, whether it's a wish list or something like that. But it's something to keep the observer going until vaccine or something or things start open up. Yeah, I think that's all I have to say. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Sifa. That's again, as I say, it's perhaps very illuminating to see what is the impact on this and yeah, the livelihoods that have been affected. I have a question here from our good friend Lars Olsen, all the way from Hawaii, who is another one that has been affected and does a lot of work in the Pacific with many of us. Does this pandemic and possible future pandemic issues highlight the need to integrate REOPS observers with electronic monitoring? And how are we going with that? Maybe I would direct these questions to two different people from two different angles. Pam from the management angle, and then Brett, if you hear me, from the industry perspective. Yep. So Pam, what is your take on Lars' view?
Thanks, and hi, Lars. So if I got the question right, it's about the potential to integrate electronic monitoring with with human observer coverage. I think it's an important element to consider, because when people often think about fisheries observers and observer programs, they think about the data or the information that observers are collecting. But in the Pacific, that scientific verification or the collection of biological samples, etc., isn't the only reason why we established our observer programs. In the way that we design and manage our fisheries here in the Pacific, we also do it to see what other benefits we can derive from these programs. And one thing for us is making sure we can still maintain employment opportunities for our people. It's not just about revenues being derived from license and access fees, but also what opportunities onshore and at sea can be provided for our people. Going back to Lars's point, I think, or question, it does raise an interesting conversation, because we've been looking, as Glenn has mentioned, at what sorts of tools could help us enhance the data needs in this region. People often tend to find new bright shiny toys and go, yeah, that's a fix-all, that's the silver bullet, and it's not. The reality and the context that we have to work in is we are small administrations. Yes, some of us make what might seem significant amounts of money, but when you're talking about reinvestment into fisheries, that still has to compete with other national priorities like health, education, infrastructure, and the like. But going into looking at what opportunities there are to use things like electronic monitoring and human observers, I think there are opportunities there. We just need to have clear objectives about what these programs are going to be doing, what information is going to be collected. Importantly, looking at the business and cost models for this to make sure that it's not just something that we implement now but can't maintain in the long term, because as we know, having the long-term data sets, having the right data for us to do the assessment work that responds to our management needs is really important.
Thank you, Pam. And yeah, you touched a couple of amazing issues here. Particularly the issues as well comes from the calibration in between what an observer can provide and what Ian can provide, and sometimes they are not totally compatible. So there should be a complementary tackle there, not a replacement tackle. How do you see that from your industry perspective, Brett?
Yeah, very much agree with Pamela's view and your comments. Yeah, it's an integration. You cannot, a camera cannot see and hear and sense what goes on board a vessel. So there will always be a need for human observers, and we as an industry support the benefits of human observers. But in terms of the integration with EMS, it's also a great way to sample more boats. It's impossible to have observers on every boat, particularly in the long lining sector, but it is possible to have full coverage with EMS. Now that doesn't have to be viewed every day of every trip, every hour. These are opportunities for EMS. Actually produces other opportunities for employment through dry observers. So you've got to have somebody looking at this footage. Whether that's a different observer that goes to sea or the same, that's really not for me to comment, but it does give an opportunity for maybe people with, perhaps a disability that couldn't go on board of a boat to be a dry observer. So it probably opens up a bigger pool. Yeah, that sampling is so important, because you can quickly get a sense for each boat and have a level of compliance or concern that things are happening on board, and certain vessels can be flagged for and have more observer, dry observer coverage to verify whether it was a one-off mistake or it's something that's happening. So both systems can work really well together, and one or the other is not feasible. Again, you can't have a human observer on every trip of every longliner, but you can, with the cameras, integrate them together, and you've got a great overlay to see what's happening out on the vessels. And I would add one more, with my industry hat on, is that in the Fiji long-lining sector, we actually put our hands up to have cameras on board of our boats. So through a funded project through the FAO that was for 4 years, that ran into 5, and we're still working on extending it. And the reason being that we were so supportive of it, for commercial reasons. There's a lot of other good aspects of it, but is compliance. We don't want our vessels participating in an activity that's not allowed. What we as a company could lose if they would be our access to the fishery. And boats aren't worth anything unless they've got a job to do. So your access is actually just as, if not more important than the boat itself, in terms of the value of any boat and its operation. So it's a bit of risk management, from the industry side too. So without going on too much further, I could. I do enjoy the subject, but it's a great question. Thanks for bringing it up, Lars. But I'll leave it there.
Good, thank you. Love to quote that one. Boats have no value if they don't have a fish to access. Perfect, love it. Absolutely love it. Right, well, this is, we're getting to the time to close this finally. So even if there was quite a few hit checks, I think it was pretty good. Normally when I have to sit it with you, where you guys are, and our panelists, I always have questions. So if you have a question to any other panelist, this is the time to do it. Otherwise, it's closed business. So anyone has a question, please fire it up if there is a question to another panelist. Otherwise, I close up. Number 1, number 2, and number 3. We're gone. We're done. So about some of the hiccups, I've just been really happy to see you guys. It's been great. I really, a more professional thing, I just really thank you all for taking the time. We're all very busy people, and you spend almost 3 hours here. So I'm sure that of 100 people who was there must have taken quite a lot of this. I have heard, I've been quite a few webinars now over the Pacific, and mostly I don't see people I know from the Pacific, and I've been around here for more half of my life. So it's good to see people that have, and I've heard things from your mouth that I have not heard in the pretty much 10 months that we're talking about COVID. So I'm very, very thankful to all of you for having taken the time to talk to everyone, talk among yourself and talk to everyone down. And I also want to thank very much Infofish for giving us a go, coming up with an idea that can be sometimes not the most open-minded. Oh, you're closer there. Yeah. Thank you, Infofish, for listening to your region and the people who works in the region. And at the personal level, thank you to everyone. And I can't wait to see you guys again. It's great to be home, but man, I miss my reality. So yeah, thank you very much, everyone.
Yeah, so thank you, Francisco. So on behalf of the director of Infofish and the rest of the Infofish team, we would like to thank you, Francisco, for giving your time to moderate this event, and also for your coordination in ensuring the swift running of the program. We look forward to continuing to work together and collaborating in future Infofish events. Also, a thank you note to all our speakers, including our keynote speaker. Thank you for taking your time over your busy schedules to share with us your valuable sights on the trends and the impacts of this pandemic in the tuna industry in the Pacific. I believe most of the participants have taken note of some of the important messages from your presentations and from your discussions. For those that would like to get a recording of this webinar, you can find this on our YouTube channel. Please do take time to fill the poll questions that are provided in the poll tab that is located at the bottom of your screen. So ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of our program, and I would like to acknowledge everyone for participating today. A special thank you once again to our sponsor for this event, Marine Instruments. Thank you for your kind contribution in making this event a success. Also, thank you to our partners, FAO and other organizations and individuals that have promoted this event across your networks. And just before we close off, I would like to announce here that the World Tuna 2021 is scheduled next year on the 19th to the 21st of May. This will be on a full virtual mode. So there will also be exhibitions on this virtual platform. So keep a lookout for updates and registrations on our website. We also have plans to include or organize more of these webinars and podcasts in future. So if you'd like us to present some of your topics, please let us know. Email us at info@infofish.org. So from all of us here at Infofish, we would like to say thank you to everyone, and we wish everyone a great week. Goodbye and stay safe.
All right.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Great.
So,
Thank you.
good to see you guys.
All right.
Bye.